Whatever happened to Carson, California? Remember that city? That city was the talk of the NFL back about a decade ago, talking about some combination of NFL teams having a stadium, the Chargers, the Raiders, an expansion LA team, maybe the Rams moving back. This was all mentioned as options for the city of Carson, California, and the 4 or 5 different stadium renderings that came along with it. And in some of the research that I was doing, I came across one of these renderings. It's remarkable that this thing even was proposed. It is literally a Soldier Field 2.0. Yes, the Chicago Bears stadium model virtually copied onto LA. And this proposal, which was done back in 2015, cost of it $1.7 billion, was designed in Carson, California for both the Chargers and the Raiders. If both of them were to play there, you can take a look. 68,000 total capacity that could expand to 72K if needed for major events like the Super Bowl. And I don't even know what to say about this. Just looking at it, you've got the dreaded mass wall of seating, the exact same thing that Soldier Field has. The Bears are trying to leave Soldier Field because it's not known as a good NFL stadium anyways. Why would you build virtually a replica model? It's funny because when I was looking up this stadium and the renderings of it, there was an article that was trying to explain what the stadium would be, and it was clear that the person in the article trying to explain it didn't know that this was just a virtual carbon copy of Soldier Field. And with like a slightly more futuristic suites area, you can see the suites stacked on top of each other. That's like a common model the NFL does sometimes, to where the entire one side of the stadium will be seats. San Francisco has this set up at Levi's Stadium, and then the entire other side would be like 3 or 4 straight decks. Almost makes it look like a hotel because there's so many straight decks of suites or luxury seating on the other side, which is the exact same thing that Soldier Field has. Ford Field has a very similar model, but it's an enclosed dome, so it's a little bit more different. I will say the exterior of this proposed Los Angeles stadium, it does look a little bit better. They do a good job bringing the green into it. You've got the nice trees, but yeah, what a weird design, especially for the time period of 2015, to go with this, with just the absurdity of the seating. And also, it's not even a retractable roof, so I thought that was a pretty crazy design, just a complete ripoff of Soldier Field. Both the Chargers and the Raiders franchises estimated that public funding could be avoided, but there was certainly high skepticism towards a deal, and of course this ended up not happening. The Chargers and Raiders do not share a home in California, but there were so many different proposals, so I want to go all the way back to the late 90s and this weird Coliseum-like design. This was an original, the first rendering I could find on an LA expansion team, the Rams coming back, whatever you want. It is kind of crazy that the NFL was not in LA for the longest time with how popular it is in America, but that was the original design back in the late 90s. This was a 2002 rendering. There's very little information on these. Otherwise, I would provide it. For 2002, I do like this rendering. It's relatively new. It has a little bit of an overhang. 2002, it is what it is. It's not going to have all the luxurious features we've seen now. I'm sure some people have seen this one. Originally, I had thought this was a proposed Olympic stadium for Los Angeles in a bid, but this was, their football stadium, the City of Industry. A billionaire proposed this stadium to be built into the side of a hill, and you can see kind of all the surrounding area. Looks like gardens. You've got water as well, a whole entire community. And this was like a $2 billion project that was proposed for an LA team back in 2008. And it would have been built if they would have gotten the go-ahead for an expansion or a relocation of an NFL team. That never ended up happening. And then this is probably one of the more famous models. This is called Farmers Field. It had a bigger capacity, 72,000, retractable roof, and a very complex infrastructure to the stadium. It was downtown Los Angeles, right next to the Staples Center, which is now Crypto.com Arena, and it would have cost around $1.2 billion, which seems really light because it does have a retractable roof. Normally, any NFL stadium with a retractable roof is probably going to run you like 1.5, even more, maybe like $2 billion. But the Farmers Field, really, really nice design. You can see the big overhangs. You can see the see-through roof that comes over the top of it right next to Staples Center. And then the interior of it, pretty common design with the 3-deck approach. You do have some nice little scoreboards there, but the overhangs, especially for the time frame, this was designed all the way back in 2010. It was pretty, futuristic, and this was meant for a potential LA team that they could either attract via expansion, whether it's the Raiders, whether it's the Rams. LA was always trying to get an expansion team, but Farmers Field was one of the more significant models, and it actually did have a name. Reminds me of the, Nationals car rental field for St. Louis. If they would have stayed put, they actually had a sponsor name already lined in place. And then this was another design called LA Football Stadium Concept 2 that was also designed back in 2010 and was to be built from 2012 to 2016 with a capacity of 65,000. You can see there's not a lot of information, but this is another one located right next to the Staples Center. Very strange design by the HKS Sports and Entertainment Group. Almost like two huge overhangs, kind of like a ship. Very, very unique. And then there is the exterior of it. Those are the only real photos I could find. I did find this. I don't know what this is, if this is like another rendering for it that was done a few years later, but when I was searching this rendering in particular, I couldn't really only find those two photos, and then it also linked me to this. This kind of looks like a miniature Chargers practice facility. It doesn't really look like the size of a stadium. Maybe it's just... That just does not look big enough to be an NFL stadium. I don't know what that is, but there was also that design as well. But yeah, I mean, LA's had numerous attempts, numerous different renderings to attract a team, to try and lure a team. But I thought that one that was basically a carbon copy of Soldier Field was the craziest one. And then, of course, they end up settling on the SoFi Stadium design. There were a few different renderings of what SoFi would look like. The original renderings, which were like from 2014, was the first one. It seemed like SoFi was going to be a lot more clear of a stadium compared to what it is now. It seems like it's got a little bit more of a tint to it, but a lot of that does have to do with like the way I think the roof works. It can be tinted or it can be clear. So really the SoFi design was always the same thing, and they end up building the crazy $5 billion stadium, and none of these stadiums end up getting okayed. It's very hard. You're going to have multiple renderings. Just look at some of the other teams and other sports that go through this. LA, it's even harder because they didn't even have a team, so they would have to attract a team, find someone that would want to move their team, and also have a stadium deal in place. That's why there's all these different renderings. It seems like LA and the NFL are such an obvious marriage, but it did take a while for it to finally happen. And now it's not just one team, but it's two teams, and now also you do have Las Vegas with one team. So the NFL really capitalizing on the markets, taking advantage of it, and you see... Say what you want about, the move from St. Louis to LA, but now the Rams being the third most valuable franchise at the crazy $5 billion SoFi, I would say, you have to say the move paid off. I can't see any scenario where the St. Louis Rams, even with a new stadium that they proposed back in 2015, I can't see any way they're a top 5 most valuable franchise, even if they won a Super Bowl. It's just, based off of the marketability, where they're located, being in LA. These are just some of the different models that were proposed for an LA team. And it's kind of interesting to see like the Chargers and Raiders both in LA sharing a stadium. Imagine if that would have happened. Listen, they dodged a bullet with that Carson City rendering. Because Carson City was always talked about as a city that could possibly get 2 teams or at least 1 team. And what a crazy rendering that is. It's like a combination of Soldier Field and Levi Stadium. Levi Stadium is hosting the 2026 Super Bowl. It was just announced, but I did just want to look back at, I didn't expect to find that type of rendering. Also, it looks like there's some type of grass field. Kind of reminds me, like right behind the end zone in the front. Reminds me of those MLB spring training facilities with the grassy like outfield beyond the wall or whatever, like where the seating is, but it's just grass. That's kind of what it reminds me of. But either way, all of these models ended up not happening. They settle on SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. You also do have the Intuit Dome being built right now in Inglewood, home of the Clippers. So Inglewood is getting all the teams. Carson City is left, unfortunately, to be pretty much completely irrelevant when it comes to Major League sports. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.